All right. Usually I like to be a bit more smooth and let the whole track play out, but I'm ready. I hope you folks are too. I hope you're doing well. I'm Cody with IronVerse Comics, and we're doing another What You Reading. How you doing, folks? Hope you're doing well. It's been an interesting couple weeks on my end. It's been harder to get on these, but did at least a gameplay stream last week, so I was at least here. But I skipped one of these because I lost a little bit of enthusiasm for what you're reading. Last week in particular was hard to get out here. But and also I really didn't have much to talk about, if I'm honest. If I remember right, last week I was only partway through one of the things we were going to talk about today, and now I'm all the way through it and through a couple other things. It might be a shorter what you're reading, might be a longer what you're reading. I don't know yet. As always, please share what you've been reading. This is all about reading. Uh, so let's just hop into it. We're going to be talking about the artist behind Superman, the Joe Shuster story. I'm excited to talk about this. Well, there's a lot there. We will be talking about it. We're talking about Alan Moore's Writing for Comics, Volume 1, which I don't think there was any further volumes. Um, and the afterword is very interesting, but it's valuable. We'll talk about it. And of course, as always, as is traditional, what you're reading, we'll be talking about an issue of Gru the Wanderer, number 42 in this case. So let's start with the heavier one. Let's start with the heavier one. The artist behind Superman, the Joe Shuster story. Howdy, Lorenzo Seastag. Welcome, welcome. Um, so I had heard of this from Comic Tropes. If you're unaware of the YouTube channel, it's worth checking out. The guy does very cool video essays on varying topics related to comics. Um, and he had suggested this as a read, as a kind of relatively unknown read. And I'm always interested in the life stories in comics to grow a wider perspective on what I'm endeavoring to do in it, right? Um, and I can't recommend this one enough. It's probably a little bit, so it's gentle enough to read to somebody who's like interested in the comics, but they're younger, right? Somebody who maybe wants to be a cartoonist or such as a not like 4 or 5, but as 10 to infinity. Because it's gentler than it maybe realistically was on the people involved, but it also does not take away the weight and the issues that the comic industry has had forever. Um, and though it tries to end on a happy note, and though the actual real life story had at least one up, it took them 50 years to get there. So you can tell it was a little bit lighter than it was, but it's the story of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster coming up with Batman, the struggles they had, pitching and just surviving in a fetus of a comic industry. And then once the comic industry actually was built, and it does claim a little heavily in here, it was built on their backs, and it was built on Superman's back quite a bit, but it wasn't the only thing there, and this kind of treats it as if it was the only thing there. Um, to really add weight to when you start seeing them getting quite literally screwed over by the companies that their creativity and their artistry had built. Um, it's got a very good warning built into it about when you're starting out, you don't know what you're how popular and how good the work you will be doing is going to be, right? You have hopes that it's going to be this amazing thing, but when you're starting out, you have a perception of, well, I've got to get my foot in the door. And these two fellas, though it does focus on Joe quite a bit more than Jerry, they signed away their rights to Superman very early on, to get their foot in the door, right? There's a push back and forth as Superman gets more and more popular. And it culminates with the Christopher Reeve's first Superman movie, where the comic industry actually stood behind these veterans and elders of their craft to try and get them something. And they have the created by credit. That's why you have a by credit in a lot of basically anything Superman related these days, but also for Bob Kane, of course, had his by credit. And eventually, more recently too, Bill Finger got finally added to it because Bob Kane was a character, for sure. And it's another thing about how dirty the comic industry can be. From a creative standpoint, the storytelling again is really soft. It's gentle. It's got that more cartoonist feel to it than, say, a hard-edged biography comic would. Um, it's got this wonderful contemporary feeling, near watercolor, pastel kind of look to it. Um, that carries it along. It puts it in its time periods, and as it grows, you can see things grow. Honestly, it does a very good job of conveying the information. The paneling's good. The writing again is it's a softball approach to what actually happened, and that's maybe doesn't provide the best perspective that someone like me who wants the information could get, but it allows it to be consumed much easier than perhaps reading a Wikipedia article or probably one of the many biographies that have been written about these folks. Um, Early in Schuster's career, he started losing his eyesight, and by the end, he was unable to do any of the drawing that he used to do because he basically lost his eyesight. He became legally blind. Um, and that's around the time the Superman movie. So they were struggling their whole time, paycheck to paycheck. Joe Shuster ended up doing pornography for a little bit before his eyesight gave out because he couldn't get any other jobs. Since Jerry and Joe, but primarily Jerry, were very angry about what happened to Superman and had continuously fought for what they believed was just compensation for their work. Uh, the industry itself didn't take kindly, so they didn't get jobs as often either. Um, as as a journey through the beginnings of the comics medium in terms of what we know it as, and not medium, the comics industry as we know it as. Very worthwhile read. Again, it doesn't hit as hard as it could have because it's softball. It's very gentle about a lot of these things that honestly are just completely heartbreaking and just really paint what an IP like Superman really is, other than what the industry has painted it as, right? There is the least softball thing they do, and I was very happy that they did that, is they print the full letter from Jerry Siegel that he wrote to industry veterans at that time when the new Superman movie was coming out, and how pissed he was about how they've been treated their entire creative lives. And it's a polite letter, I'll give it that, but it's angry, and you can feel how deservedly angry it is. And so that I'm very happy they printed that full letter in here for the readers to check out, and that's right before the end chapter, before we have our rise, right, and the industry stands behind these folks and gets them their buy credit. And sets a kind of a new standard for how to deal with comic creators when their work is adapted and sees massive success. Um, It's still pretty crap these days, honestly. But if you look at the difference between pre that letter and afterwards, it's night and day. You went from lucky to get scraps, and I mean lucky. I mean that was 10% of the time you got some kind of scrap. Um, to now, you're at least gonna get a credit at the end of the movie. If it's a big icon, you'll probably get a credit during the beginning credits. Um, and you should usually get some sort of creative royalty out of it. That was not the case before this struggle, and as a tale of even Jewish creative entrepreneurs, it's incredible the amount of struggles and adaptation and learning that went into it. It's a really good tale. Um, it's it was a hard read, but it was again it was softball compared to the reality of the things in a lot of cases, and so that leaves it open to more audiences. But again, it doesn't hit as hard as it could have. The artwork is extraordinary, as I was talking about. The pastel kind of painterly style, very expressive. It sets the tone quite well. Um, talks about the kind of the rivalry that came up between what was then Timely Comics and what was then National Comics that became Detective Comics and Marvel. Um, a little bit, but it mainly focuses on Jerry and Joe and their life tale. And though, of course, when it's like 50 years worth of experience that's being shared, it's probably missing a whole lot. And to undertake this endeavor as a writer creative duo, as these two folks have done, incredible job. It must have been exceedingly intimidating, especially since it wouldn't be published by DC. It wouldn't be directly corporately sanctioned, right? They wanted to hit a biography, so they got published by these folks who I haven't heard of otherwise, called Super Genius. Um, it's a it's a trip. Looks like Neil Gaiman's worked with Super Genius. That's the main advertisements at the beginning of this. It does talk about Neil Adams. In fact, the first phone call towards the end. So it doesn't focus on him directly, but uh, I think it's right after the letter they talk about Neil just like reading that letter and being heartbroken and then being the main industry push that got everybody else rallied behind him. So it does talk a little bit about Neil. Yeah. Neil Adams speaking is this Jerry Siegel, so that's their first talking about it and figuring it out. And then after that, Adams kind of organized the rallying cry that got them their credit, and set a standard that isn't always upheld even these days, but allowed some footing for creators to get compensated for their ideas when they become bigger than what the creators were able to do by themselves, right? Um, and yeah, howdy, Keith. So it talks a little bit. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more behind it. It starts talking about Neil at page 162, and it ends what 4 pages later. 3 pages later. So it doesn't talk much about Neil. In fact, I think it's just very barely towards the end. Again, they wanted to end on a happy note with them getting their credit, right? But that's not the end of the story. And it includes some God, how many? Like 10, 15, about 30 pages of notes, so you can go back and learn a little bit more per page of stuff that happened. So I mean, they put a lot of work into this to try and make it seem. I say seem accurate. It's accurate. It's just how do you encompass 50 years of creation of such a iconic IP, the original superhero almost. Um, so again, this would have been such an intimidating project to take on, and to even come as far as they did with it is incredible. Um, and the fact that it's softball, so you have a child who's really interested in comics. Um, this is a stark warning without being off-putting, right? Um, because it does have that happy kind of like you can fight and get there. But when you look at it in perspective, holy hell, it shouldn't have taken 40, 50 years for them to get to a point where they can live comfortably off an IP that for, God, 40 of those years or 30 to 40 of those years was making money like hand over fist. Um, ugh, it's a rough one, but it's a perspective myself, and I hope many other creators can appreciate very, very strongly and understand. We stand on the shoulders of giants who suffered maybe their entire fucking lives to get a scrap, and all these new, Netflix deals and all these the boom of this superhero movie thing it's slowing down now, but for the last decade, last 15 20 years, 15 years has really like taken off and made these mega corporations incredible amounts of money. um, the sparks that lit it, that kept it going, that kept the fire going, they are often completely ignored. And even folks who create such an icon are sometimes thrown to the wolves in this industry. And in fact, they were often thrown to the wolves for a very long time. Uh, and it's something we should remember as comic fans and comic creators. Um, we're seeing this new renaissance now. I'm calling it a renaissance because I want it to be something inspiring and creatively strong and just wonderful, right? Of creators taking the reins into their own hands because publishers they got so complacent they no longer do much that creators can't do themselves. And just in the last couple of weeks, with the Substack revolution, that some of the biggest names in comics right now are like, yeah, nah, sure, we'll keep working with you, but I can do a lot of this myself. And that's incredible to see. I think that is one of the healthiest things that has ever happened to the comic book industry. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if it's big enough and has enough drive and growth to support that type of business model where it's every creator for themselves. But that is much healthier than being owned by a mega corporation and having your ideas just whoop, those are ours forever. In fact, that's one of the other heavier things that I'm glad they put in here is they had good chunks of the contract that Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel signed, but it wasn't. It was on the back of the check, right? So to cash this check, they had to sign away forever. It wasn't just in perpetuity. What was the phrasing? It was insanity, this phrasing that they used. It might take me a second to find it, but I think it'll be worth finding. Um, there's Superman, the original Lois model. There's good little bits like that, and a bunch of the other comics they worked on that you wouldn't have any idea really because of they didn't last. The IP wasn't as strong, right? Here we go. Here we go. Hereby sell and transfer such work and stripped, all goodwill attached thereto, and exclusive right to the use of the characters and story, continuity, and title of a strip contained herein or therein to you and your assigns to have and hold forever and to be your exclusive property. Whew! The word choices, and what is this in the 40s, early 30s? Yeah, that legal language is just it's insanity. If a creator had seen that kind of language these days, I would hope they just be like, nope. Though I know that wasn't the case, and even after they won their case for the movie right and byline right and all that, that's the mentality when you're dealing with these mega corporations, and even when you're dealing with some smaller publishers. Though again, that perspective has changed because creators need publishers less and less. And some publishers are realizing this and are doing their best to provide value to the creator instead of guaranteeing the creators giving them value. And that's a wonderful shift in mindset since, but to your and your assigns to have and hold forever and to be your exclusive property. Whew, that language. Oh my god. But as a comic creator, as a comic fan, if you're interested in the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into building this industry and these iconic American folklore icons, uh, read this. I very much recommend it. Looks like my copy came from the Harvard County Public Library, and I got it for like $10, used off Amazon, and 170 some odd pages of well-respected uh, comic creation history. Again, more softball than it is, and you can't cram 50 years of insanity and suffering into something this size. But god damn, did they do a good effort. So definitely check it out. I'm so glad I bought a copy because this is something I will probably need to periodically reread um, to keep perspective on this work I'm trying to do and this medium I love. Um, yeah, I'm very curious. I actually have a Substack as well. I jump on every new tool that's available. Most of them don't work out since I started, right? So I have a Substack as well, IronVerseComics.substack.com. If we get enough uh, subscribers, I guess they call on there, then I will certainly be considering that. It's basically a Patreon model, which I've already got Patreon up and running, but it's not Patreon, so some people are willing to do that because they don't like Patreon, but I doubt Substack's going to be much better. And and again, with this now, every creator and creative team for themselves instead of falling under flags and banners. Um, I have no idea how that's going to shake up in the next 5 to 10 years. I think if I had to bet, there will be a couple that rise to the top and are very able to use it, just like we saw with crowdfunding. Um, but because it's basically crowdfunding, right? But I think the vast majority of even like professionals who have, footing in the larger industry and are trying to bring that fan base over to their own work, I think the vast majority of them will be buried in the sea of competition. Um, and of course, I worry about that for our own work. But all you can do is carry on, right, and push forward and follow the path that you have. And I'm so glad more creators are taking that chance, even if that chance is from my perspective, depending on the creator, right, like the Donny Cates, Ryan Stegman group, they'll probably be able to get a solid foot. Um, but there's a few others that I've seen that are smaller that I think I wish them the best. It's the best way I could say it. And you know, it didn't quite all start here, but this was a major, major footnote to where we are today. And I think people don't. I don't hear enough creators consistently talking about how the industry even got this far, and this is a huge chunk of it. So yeah, I recommend checking it out very, very much. Um, Beautiful artistry in terms of again of the art. The writing can be a little clunky. There's some panels that don't need to be there. There's some conversations that aren't handled the best. Uh, there's some, if I remember right, there's a scene or two that don't even need to be in it. It was just maybe an attempt at characterization that fell flat. But again, just an insane attempt to get this tale of what, even at the end, and no matter how much they tried to make it a happy ending, it was a tale of tragedy um, in its own medium, discussed in its own medium. I appreciate it very much. It was a very good read to have picked up. Artists, writers, creators must understand that industry is predatory. Yeah, creative as an industry is predatory. Again, it's becoming less and less so because creators can now be their own predators. It just means that again, the creator to creator dynamic is going to be less cordial. And that bothers me too because this industry is not strong enough to continuously sustain infighting. It just cannot happen. Sooner or later, folks are just going to have to let bygones be bygones and just let growth occur instead of, I see this guy I don't like creating, I better tear him down to build myself up. That's not going to work, but that's what's going to be supported in this coming 5 to 10 years, and I don't know what that'll mean. But it's going to be survival of the fittest, and that's honestly all this world ever guarantees. It's not all this world offers. It's not the best this world can be, but it is all that it can guarantee. So I can't complain too hard about it. It's part of the rule set of the game, right? Particularly in honestly survival down to the most base levels to the most esoteric levels. But that's the artist behind Superman, the Joe Shuster story. I might talk about it more in its own thing because there's just so much in there and so much excluded and so much specifics, very important notes that are hit that I, of course, did not hit. Um, but the best way is to experience it yourself. So there you go. Then we'll take a short time to talk about Sergio Aragonas's Gru, The Wanderer, number 42 from August 1988. Um, It follows off the heels of 41 and 40, where you're meeting Granny Gru, and she's trying to use Gru to further her gypsies' wealth. She has a traveling band of gypsies. And the first two, very much like this, shenanigans ensue. When you involve Gru, that's his big bit, is as soon as Gru becomes involved in something, it goes ass up and gets wacky, right? That's one of the sitcom-y bits that Argonas built into this. The scheme in this issue is to marry Gru off so that to a prince, and they start with a smaller wedding so that they can get the dowry from this relatively rich farmer to pay for a more extravagant appearance, so they can pretend that Guru is a prince to marry off to a local princess who only wants to marry for love, so she's rejected suitor after suitor after suitor. And it goes about how you expect. On the cover, this is the farmer's daughter that he is marrying there. Um, and it's a joke. They both don't like each other. They both want to get married only because their parents need them to be married. And this is her, the farmer's daughter's, could be her last chance because of her appearance that she ever gets married. And for Gru, they just need the money, right? Um, very, it was a less, I don't want to call it a simple plot, but it was pretty simple. And it ended faster than I expected. It didn't explore the plot as much as I expected. Because by the time they get him together and they are arranging the marriage with the princess, it's almost over. And I thought they would play on that dynamic with the princess and Gru more. And that the ending is just Gru being dumb. Well, you already married me to this farmer's daughter. How am I supposed to be able to marry her too? And he doesn't even realize that it was all part of the scheme. They just want the money, and then they're gonna roll. They're gonna bounce. And that's a pretty basic plot line and how it ends. The princess only agrees to marry Gru because she figures out it's Gru and not some random prince. So she thinks that, well, if her father finds out that Gru is the husband, he'll back the hell off, right? Because it's Gru. He's a legendary buffoon that brings trouble and destruction basically wherever he goes. And the ending, the ending moral, which is one of the few I can remember off the top of my head, was if you marry for money, then you're not really marrying at all. And there was some fun imagery. Sergio Aragonas's comedic timing can never be underestimated. Got a couple chuckles out of this, but as I've said kind of again and again when I'm reviewing Gru issues on Whatcha Reading, some are stronger than others on the humor factor, and this had a couple chuckles, but it didn't stand out as funnier than others I've read. But I've never read a bad one. I can always get through Grus. It's not like a lot of comics where it'll hit a lump that you got to push through and then it'll get good again, or sometimes not get any better right from the beginning. Um, But Drew's never done that to me. It's always been at least a decent spend of 10 minutes, right? It's always been worth my time. And so that's why I always recommend this. Also, it being one of the original creator-owned comics that was pushed so hard by an immigrant national that really had just a very unique voice, both in his artistic choices on art and on his artistic choices in writing. And some very cool stuff. Very cool stuff. Yeah. I used to suggest until I started researching myself that if you come across a Gru in your dollar bin, pick it up. But it seems to be very rare that you will come across an issue of Gru in your dollar bin. But if you do, pick it up. And you won't usually be let down. It'll definitely be worth the dollar that was on the cover price. That if you can pick it up for a dollar now, totally held its value, even with inflation. All right. Then this last bit, and I don't know how much I'm going to be able to say about this. This is the only non-comic that I've talked about on Whatcha Reading. This is Alan Moore's Writing for Comics. Volume 1, but there wasn't any other volumes as far as I can tell. What do I even talk about this? It's a lot of technical. It's written well. Even as he says in his afterword, it's if you're just starting off in comics and comics writing, it has some decent framework. But he wrote the afterword about 20 years after the original here was written, and he says, "Well, I've gotten older and wiser and figured out a lot of what I was talking about, if taken as rigid rules, is bullshit." And so it comes off as a slight waste of time, but not in that it's an overall exploration of this man's own exploration of the art. And of course, it's Alan Moore who has hit such resonance again and again in his own creative career, um, that the voice and the messages and the choices that he made to communicate to the up and coming creator, they're worth hearing. But as he said in it, don't take them too seriously. I've in the past 20 years I've figured out a lot of what I said is not exactly the best path for me as a creator, and that's one of the other things too. He never gets arrogant. In fact, he pokes at his own arrogance that he's had throughout it, and that's always good to see. Uh, doesn't come up pompous, which Alan Moore's writing itself can sometimes get a little pompous, which he acknowledges in here, which is great. Um, it helped me realize a lot of the things that he naturally did when he started out is what I do. So that was kind of neat to see, that there is kind of a natural path, that there will be a lot of variation on, but it's the same direction, if nothing else. Um, a lot of things that he focused on that I'm kind of like, I'm glad he did, because I had to think about it a little bit longer, from pacing to panel transitions to the importance of not only characterization, of course, right, but of how you convey that characterization. Um, I mean, it's a very short thing. If you have any interest in Alan Moore's writing, pick this up. Again, I was very glad I did. Um, and it's another one, since it's short enough, I'll probably read through a couple times to see if I can glean anything extra. But at the end of the day, it does what most educational material in comics does, and it just tells you to freaking make the comic right. Um, put as much of your own soul and experience into it as allows and facilitates the work. Try and hit deeper notes. I mean, all of these things that any creator worth their salt naturally is inclined to do. But it reinforces it and shares that this other very famous and very skilled creator also did that, right? So that's important. But it's I'm gonna have to read it again. I mean, I read this all basically in the last 2 days, and like no specifics are jumping out on me from each of these positions. It was a lot. I think even he said himself, it's a lot of wandering and meandering because it's such a big, big concept, right? Um, that you can't really cover it all. Period. Um, but I mean, he did an admirable attempt, especially when this was kind of at his most popular. Um, he explains plot and script. I'll talk about that a little bit with his famous, what's it called? I don't remember if it's called The Man of Tomorrow, something like that, where Superman is. I was first introduced to the story through the Justice League Unlimited adaptation, um, where Superman on his birthday, Mongol sends him the Black Rose or whatever it's called, that gives you your deepest desires and traps you in them, right? And Superman and Wonder Woman are coming by to give him his birthday presents and hang out with their buddy. And he kind of breaks down how that was scripted and how the ideas manifested, what he was trying to do with the ideas, and for that was and that was really interesting for me to dive into. I really enjoyed kind of going through his creative process on that. But a lot of the rest of it was very, start with an idea, then world build, and then allow the world to kind of shape the plot, and then don't stick to the plot too heavy because then you're going to derail yourself by trying to force the plot to work, and little things like that. That again, I would think a lot of writers and a lot of creators going into this, that's already kind of natural, but when it's reiterated by someone like Alan Moore, it'll stick with you a little harder, I think, and it'll give you a perspective. And again, that just like Joe Shoes, it gives you a perspective on the medium. That when I get these kind of educational bits on the industry, that's what I want. I want to see how this industry is born and as much of the interior of the working minds that have built this thing. And from that perspective, very much worth it. And I mean, it's like $2 used or something because it's this thin little thing from Avatar Press. Um, nothing, nothing crazy, right? And wasn't the hugely popular thing. Like even when I ordered this, I thought it was going to be, I thought it was going to be a thick little thing. I didn't look at the page count or anything on Amazon. It's just, oh, Alan Moore wrote something on writing comics. I should check that out just because. Though he and I disagree on a lot of things, his perspective I very much value because it's one of the few outsiders breaking into comics. And by outsiders, I mean like societal outsider breaking into comics, doing what they need, making a massive creative impact, and then getting out. It's one of the few stories of that ever happening. And just a relative genius in the medium as well. Even though, again, a lot of his writing I find hard to get through, depending on what it is. But this was worth reading. It was definitely worth reading. Um, and that kind of covers my end of it. I should check chat again. Um, There's a music video called "Give Me the Mermaid" featuring a Disney lawyer yelling about how Disney owns characters forever. The video was apparently edited on Disney's own equipment after hours. Huh. Interesting, interesting. Yeah, Disney is one of those. They clamped so hard onto copyright law when they were built on folklore and Creative Commons works, and our current atmosphere of mega corporations is complete insanity, from my perspective, and that's what I'm delving into in issue 4 of Jack Irons. But and I'm doing it through a very ancient Eastern tale. I think it's a cool way to do it, but we'll see if I can get it done. But on Whatcha Reading, that's what I read this last 2 weeks, about a little under. In fact, both of the Gru and most of Alan Moore's writing for comics was just within the last couple hours. The Joe Shuster took me a little bit, and then I was just not able to read as much the last couple weeks. And then I think it was last week I just did not find footing to talk about the little bit of Joe Shuster's story I had read, right? And that's all I had read, so wasn't the best time. And even getting here today was a little rough, but I wanted to not miss another week. I didn't want to miss last week, but just couldn't fit it in. So got this one in. As always, if you folks have been reading anything yourselves, I'd love to hear about it and talk about it while we're live, or in the comments below if you folks are so inclined down the line. But that about covers everything I needed to talk about this week on What You're Reading. The 13th What You're Reading, which is pretty neat. The last one was the 12th, which meant about 3 months of it straight before I took a week off, and then starting again this week. Try to do these every week. I try to have something read every week, and just have a forum to connect with you folks. And if anybody has a strong opinion on something they've read this week, I'd love to hear it. Or any week when we're doing one of these, I'd love to hear it. It helps me gain perspective again on this crazy industry that's full of infinite potential, infinite types of creators, and creator dynamics and storyline dynamics and everything from cartoons, meaning the cartoon strips, to massive self-contained hyper social dynamic involved graphic novels, right? I'm totally interested in what everybody's doing because from my perspective, what I've always had coming into this place is we have an infinite, not an infinite, we have a gluttony of information, and the only way we figure out any of this is by collectively understanding that gluttony of information, and finding what is truth to ourselves and sharing that, right? Um, and some can do it through art, some do it through their work, some do it through their family, some do it through, honestly, there's so many different ways to do it. Um, and part of what I do on this channel is I try to celebrate that in my own humble, sometimes meandering, sometimes boring way. But I appreciate being able to, and I appreciate folks who give me time, whether it's through our work, through this channel, through interaction. Um, I really appreciate it. Local library usually has it. That's a great place, and I'm hoping people are taking more and more advantage of the libraries, because if you don't, they will disappear. Right now, they are subsidized, but they are an incredible place to find new things. Uh, and depending on your library, they can have a very extensive set of sequential art in there. That's just from your pulpy superhero stuff to these newer, very grounded graphic novels, to your cartoon books. Great place to find that stuff, and I should check it out myself more often. I definitely should. But all right, let me see something real quick, folks, and then we'll probably close out unless anybody watching has anything they want to talk about, preferably something you read, but I'm here, I'm live, I'm happy to talk about whatever. But I'm going to be checking something out currently. Let me look. Doesn't look like. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, so I think, let me see. Yeah, I think that might do it. We've been keeping these down a little bit shorter. Sometimes I have a lot to say about things. But last couple weeks, it's been about 35, 40 minutes. Usually if I'm more spry in the morning and I have a couple cups of coffee in me, I'll have a lot to say about things. Today it was a slog of a bunch of mailing work, finishing off those metal cards here hopefully very soon, and just house maintenance before I got to go to work tomorrow early, and that drains me pretty good. Uh, So yeah, sorry for the low energy if that's felt, but it is what it is, and I'm glad I got here. I'm glad I got here. If you read any of the Allegiance art books, no, I haven't. The whole debacle with Red Rooster's production. Um, kind of made me less supportive. I really enjoy Elizabeth Breitweiser's coloring work and Sarah from TKO Studios, but that's pretty old at this point. In fact, that was out probably a good year before Red Rooster was. And I enjoy Mitch's kind of loose, sketchy style. I think it's very, very cool. I've heard good things about Red Rooster when it finally came out to backers. Um, I heard decent things about the individual issues that were being sold. I didn't hear much about Base Reeves or about the Futurists. Or I think Blake Northcott's book through them did okay. But I haven't been following them. No. Basically, a lot of the works that came through that massive spike in aggressive energy during 2018, it turned me right the fuck off. There's some folks I was very glad to work with during that time that I am less stoked about now, um, just because of how they have handled things. And I'm sure they can say the same about me, in all honesty. Um, so I lost enthusiasm for a lot of that more aggressive, organized style of crowdfunding. Um, so I've been paying attention more to web comics. I've been paying attention more to a lot of Kickstarters, a lot of folks who I see being more individualistic and having a greater focus on the love of the medium and the love of their work than on what is often a disdain for what the comic medium has become. And at the same time, I totally see and often agree with that disdain. Um, but that goes for me. That goes for most of human society at this point. A lot of it is just awful, right? So if I'm just focusing on comics and pretending that that's the only problem, it's a waste of my time. Absolute waste of my time. My time is better spent trying to build something better. And though I'm not doing the absolute best at that, I still feel that my energy is better put towards um, building. And Allegiance Arts, I'm glad they put their head down and they just worked. It sucks it took so long. It sucks that a lot of people felt really burnt by their work. It sucks that it doesn't seem like the Walmart angle really took off. I was really hoping it would for them, for comics in general. I want everybody to succeed. But yeah, Allegiance Arts, I just didn't. Nothing hooked me um, on their work, and then as I followed their work, I became less and less interested. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it's bad at all. I have no idea. And again, I believe I've heard good things about the completed Red Rooster book that people got in terms of the story. I have no idea though myself very deeply. Yeah. Hey, Dr. Science Wizard, long time no see. Glad to see you. Um, there's still a ton of issues sitting on the shelf at Walmart. I'm assuming if that's in NM, that's interesting because we never got Allegiance up here where I'm at. Um, but I think it was an interesting idea. Kind of pissed that Walmart ended up just tagging them on the covers, right? They had no idea how to deal with comics. And that's a problem. Comics are kind of wiggy that way. Um, I know DC was doing like collections for a while through Walmart too. I don't know if they still are. Um, It's tough. It's tough. Like right, like the industry is going to get crueler and crueler as the even manga is getting crueler and crueler. I mean, we act like it's this big deal and it's kicking ass, but it's manga and anime are also kind of getting their asses kicked by the global situation, and again, just focusing on how bad shit is needs to be done. You can't just ignore it, but it's not where my headspace needs to be because I've been in a very hard headspace for a long time, and it just kept getting worse with situations, how situations change, and for me, and I've continuously tried to keep my head above that very palpable quicksand that is falling into nihilism and into everything is crap. And I don't get angry. I get sad. I know human potential is better than what we put out. And that starts at me, right? I know I can do better than I do. Um, and I don't get mad at that. There's no reason to be mad. You don't get mad at somebody for trying their best at the time that you know in the present. You can't get mad at somebody for doing their best in the present and failing. And I feel like that's what humanity has consistently done forever. And it could be very dark to dive into that. Uh, but there's the other coin, and the other side of the coin is that, we're still here, we're still growing, we're still pushing forward, we're still seeing some amazing things happen even in these darkest of times, even during the darkest of times, which were a lot more brutal and physical and fear-based, right? We've gone through and rose above and built something better. And I know that'll come. I don't know if it'll come during my lifetime, but I would love to have laid one brick in its foundation, right? So that's what I try to focus on is building that brick, finding the right place to put it, and cementing it. Um, and if that can't be done, again, got to try your best during the moment, and I can't get mad at myself. I can be disappointed. I can be deeply sad about it, but the main point of any of those emotions is I just need to be aware of it so that I can do better. And I'm hoping that a lot of what I perceive these days from a lot of different angles, and we can talk specifically about the comics industry, but it again is pervasive just all over. Um, there's not a lot of these things aren't done out of enthusiasm. They're done of fear or they're done out of sorrow, and that fear or sorrow is the cause of the anger. And anger has done me good in terms of getting things done, but it's never done me good in terms of growth. And yeah, so I've steered clear from that perspective in every facet I've been able to, particularly this last year. Just because I don't have the headspace for it, I just don't. It's occupied by a lot of other things that are much more important to me and my soul and my growth than being angry at the concept of other and what other does. Right? Um, I have no control over that. And if I try to force it, that's where most of these problems come from. So divorce yourself from that. At least that's what I do, and focus on what is in your control that you can again build upon. That's my hope. But I've I was talking about it earlier. This climate of comics is going from labels to creator versus creator, from individual to individual. And I'm curious how that dog eat dog kind of perspective manifests in the next 5 to 10 years. Um, it could be a source of great growth. It could be that kind of direct conflict could be incredibly powerful for growth, but it can just as easily lead to a erosion of interest. So I have no idea where it's going, but I do know it's going to be less giant group versus giant group and more near one-on-one kind of I'm hoping less negative interaction, but I don't know. I don't know. Um, you know, more of these bigger creators under something like a Substack or whatever support Substack, but when they're charging like $70 a year for their subscription rate, each of these creators are doing that. That's not tenable for the vast majority of people right now. We ain't doing that good on an economic level. I wish we were, but we are not. Um, so that means there's going to either be more creative action on the creating angle, right? More imagination injected in the work, or it's going to be more imagination injected into the conflict. And likely it's going to be both. But won't know for 5 to 10 years. Right now, I'm staying in my lane, trying to hopefully get a fourth issue done. That would be incredible, and it would do quite a bit of good for my soul if I'm able to do that. To find that I still have a place in this insanity. Um, but even if I don't, I've carved out a space in this insanity that I never have to give up. So that in itself is very reassuring. Even if there's a plateau of growth, um, that plateau won't be sinking. So that's something I can take a little bit of pride and a little bit of strength from. But yeah, it's crazy out there. I'm doing what I can to learn, adapt, and grow. I hope every creator is, and I hope they approach it more from a let's grow this thing, and less from there's only so much of this thing to go around. But that has to play out on a person-to-person basis, right? So we'll see. We'll see. But off of that dour tone, um, I don't know what I'll be reading next week. That's the problem. I think I'm going to have to just pick something out. I did read like a chapter of Trigun. I didn't end up talking about on here. Trigun can be incomprehensible. That's my problem with it. It's very rare a very popular work is incomprehensible. It's funny to me. I think that's part of its charm, right? It's got a very strong characterization, but the plot and the storytelling and the pacing and the art is just often incomprehensible is the best way to put it. You don't know what the hell's going on. So I didn't talk much about that. And it was only a chapter or something. I like to do it more when there's a whole section or something done. I did get another volume of Gunwitch Kirihime, which is just good fun, goofy manga kind of work. I didn't read that new volume though, so I can't say much about it yet. Um, I've got Shaman King up to what's been publicly released in English with this new wave through Amazon. Um, but I'm waiting till next month to get the next omnibus, which is 3 volumes. So be talking about that next month. I've been really enjoying Shaman King. That's been a really big one been good for my soul. Um, oh, I guess I did read that and didn't talk about it. I did finish that. Um, it was God, what's it called? It was Hellblazer by Garth Ennis. Damnation something. Damnation's Flame. I did finish that. It was 5 issues in there, 3 of which were a concurrent storyline, and then 2 which were relatively self-contained. The concurrent storyline was interesting. It was very political, um, and it was fine. It was fine. It wasn't terribly heavy-handed. It was a lot of what I expect from Ennis, because he really dove into the mechanisms of politics and the fact. And by saying that, you think it's just like the interaction of policies and of politicians and stuff. No, no, from the military level to the societal level to the interpersonal level to racial levels to all kinds of different levels. He has had about as hard of a time, if not worse, than I have looking at this machinery that we've built and be trying to be any sort of proud of it. Um, and that's why he's one of my favorite authors, and he brought me into this comic thing called comics with his Ghost Rider run, and I had no idea what I was getting into. But I did read Damnation's Flame. I'd recommend that. I did finish it. I talked about it on Whatcha Reading 12, but I hadn't finished it during Whatcha Reading 12, so is what it is. It's been about a week since I read it. The two self-contained stories didn't stick with me as much as the actual kind of grouping, the three-issue mini storyline with John going on a witch walk. Which at the same time in Shaman King, you, the main character, that was going on a witch walk, I'd say. And then a week or two before that, I went on my own witch walk. And I've actually got the material to go on another soon. I hope I come out of it with a more uplifting perspective, a more everything will be fine kind of perspective that I came out of the last one with. Um, because this world is just grinding and grounding a lot of people these days, and hurts my soul when it's going after me, and it hurts my soul even more when I see it happening to everybody. And particularly when it doesn't have to, when we have so much potential to be so much better. But that's what it is. I'm super excited for issue number 4, Jack Irons. If you haven't signed up for it, let's go ahead and put on that Stan Lee marketing hat, huh? Let's go ahead and do that real quick before I get off this. Howdy, Jake. Hope you're doing well, brother. Hope you're doing well. I'm glad to see you here. Just had finished talking about what I read in the last week and a half or so. Then I went off on a tangent on my perspective of human society as well as my perspective of the comics industry. So that's super interesting. But I'm going to pitch issue 4 of Jack Irons real quick, and then I think I am out of here. Let's go ahead and go on over there real quick. Boop. So it is up for pre-launch. Folks at the pre-launch, I think, are going to get about $5 to $10 off the actual issue number 4. So if you want to sign up, that'd be great. We're almost at 100 sign-ups, which is incredible. I need to sell about 500 issues of number 4 to get it funded. So that's a hell of a thing. I haven't really put into the marketing yet, but it's the hill I got to climb on it. We will be reframing a dive into, again, corporate hell, into the machinery of society through a very ancient tale that has resonated and been super important to Eastern society for, God, thousands of years at this point. So I'm hoping choosing something with such a grand impetus and resonance to it and combining it with a more current perspective on things will allow something very cool to be said, and maybe even understood would be great. But we'll see. I'm really happy with the script. It's going to be it's our 32 pages. It's our normal length for a issue of Jack. And the second half of the book is going to be the Ashcan of Cactus Coyote. So you actually will be getting about 48 to 52, I believe, pages of straight up story in this instead of the 32 pages and then about 16 pages of extras. I'm going to see if providing that extra value as well as pushing another IP will maybe give us an extra shot in the arm. That would be incredible, particularly since both these issues are dealing with kind of a similar theme in terms of Jack is diving into Las Faminas, the entryway to Famine's corporate hell, and Cactus Coyote is dealing with Spinaroonie Town, which is the closest thing to Famine Inc. without being Famine Inc. in the galaxy, and it's kind of relevant on how they both are tackling it, with him being a little bit more jovial about the issues and how these things manifest than I will be. But again, I'm not diving into nihilism. The point has never been nihilism. It's been staring the devil in the eye and saying, you got no power. And that's what we're going to be doing with issue 4. So I'm very hopeful. We will see what happens to it. But if you haven't signed up yet, I'll go ahead and throw this link in chat. Be great if you did, especially if you want the at least the discount. I'm hoping to do more than just the discount, but we will see what I can manifest. I'm hoping to launch at the beginning of next month. It might be about halfway through next month. My hope is to have at least a page for Maxi Dallo done before I launch. But he's got another project from Adam Lawson, which I do recommend checking out. I think the pre-launch went up as well just today, called Kids and Monsters. Maxie's line art on point as always, and he's actually paired with Common Daniel Warren Johnson collaborator Mike Spicer, who recently did the colors on Bigfoot Bill. Oh, not Bigfoot. Well, Beta Ray Bill, and also did Murder Falcon. He's usually on the book with Daniel Warren Johnson because he's an incredible colorist, and Maxie's lines have that kind of Daniel Warren Johnson feel to them. And Kids and Monsters concept looks really interesting, so check that out as well if you folks are interested. Always happy to see my collaborators actually getting more and more work and kicking more and more ass. Um, that's if I can be anything in this industry, I want to be a conduit for growth. That doesn't always mean I'll be following alongside it, and I understand that. But it is awesome to see. It's really awesome to see. Mike Spicer worked with Maxie also on Maxie's short in the Kill Journal, which I'm hoping to have in hand here soon. I have no idea if my short actually got printed through the Kill Journal, but I did make a paycheck, so I'm really excited about that. And it made a difference, so I'm very very happy to have worked with Adam Lawson. Very cool. My best experience with an editor also. So check that out. I know I'm shilling something else besides my own work, but again, I want us all to grow. So if you guys are interested, if you've read issues 1 through 3 of Jack, issue 4 follows right on that and dives into the actual mechanics and more of an adventure story and less of a folk tale told by a drunk. So we'll see how that goes. But with that said, link is in chat if you want to sign up. As always, check out IronVerseComics.com for the latest news updates. You can check out our fan art, our videos go up there. You can check out our prior works. You can start your journey if you haven't read it yet. Issues 1 of Jack Irons and the actual full-length manga of Cactus Coyote. Totally worth your time and totally a free read. And yeah, I'm excited to see what the future holds. Issue number 3 of Jack Irons just went up for digital order on wickedpublishing.net as well. It's $1 if you had previously snagged 1 and 2 off their site. Well, now you can snag issue 3. We should have the physicals up there hopefully by the end of the month as well of 1, 2, and 3. And I'm hopeful to get the story into more hands. We've already almost had about 3,000 readers for Jack Irons, which is way more than I ever expected to ever be able to do. I just wanted to make a comic. I would have been super stoked if anybody read it, let alone as many of you wonderful folks who have allowed me to make 3. And participate in numerous more, whether it's through marketing, through a little bit of editing when folks asked, through a little bit of feedback, through inspiring others. That one's still I'm trying to comprehend. But yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you folks joining me here on this stream, and I guess that covers it. Appreciate you folks very much, and catch you next week. Hopefully I will have something interesting read next week. These 3 things are fine. I'm going to have a Gru issue to talk about next week no matter what. That's until I run out of Gru issues, you're going to have to deal with one of those. Argonas and Mark Evanier, his editor, I guess is the best way to put it, but they change his role in each book. Like the title. They change his title in each book, which is kind of neat. So he's kind of their jack-all-trades that I think helps make Gru happen. They now have a YouTube channel as well that they're doing. I think last week they did their first question and answer. So if you like Gru, like me, it's worth participating in. Again, it's one of the... We talked about Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel today. They pushed it for trying to get rights to things that companies owned. Sergio Argonas quietly pushed to never give it up in the first place. And from that perspective, let alone his talent, it's worth supporting, especially as he's getting older, and sooner or later we will be receiving no more Gru. So please check it out. Please support it. They just released Gru and Tarzan, or Tarzan and Gru through Dark Horse. So if you're interested in that as well, please support it, because I think if you give that enough money, we'll get more Gru as well. And I guess that's it. I guess that's all I got to really talk about. I talked about a lot of things I didn't maybe need to, but I'm happy that you folks joined me, and I'll catch you next time on this rusty trail. You folks take care.